Who are you going to see? Michelle. Oh, this is so cool.
I know.
How excited are you?
I'm so excited. I cannot wait.
And host and co-creator of a podcast of the same name, Heather McGee.
On your feet for our forever First Lady,
But just the sheer gladness, and I tell this story in the book. I saw an interview with Toni Morrison, which opens this chapter on starting kind. The importance of greeting yourself with kindness as a thing we don't do enough, we don't practice. But Toni Morrison was talking about a lesson she learned as a parent, that, you know, when her kids were little, they'd often come in the room and the first thing she'd do was pick out what was wrong. Oh, you know, lift your sock up and fix your eyebrows, and oh, are you wearing that sweater? And, you know, she said she would have the tendency to greet them with a critical eye. And she had to stop herself and think, is that the message that I really want to give? Is that the feeling that I feel when they walk in the room? You know, no, that's not it. But as parents, especially mothers, you know, I find since that story, I find myself holding my tongue when my kids come home. And I'm like, is that what you wore there? Is what's going through my mind. When all I really feel is, I'm just glad you're here. So what she said she had to work on doing was working on not getting rid of the critical eye, but not leading with the critical eye. Lead with the truth in her heart, which was, I am just glad you're here. You know, I say that because we don't do that to ourselves enough. That's a tool that I'm working on, is starting to greet myself with gladness, not hear my fearful mind talk about all the things that are wrong, not create that negative loop for myself, because we all tend to do that, particularly we as women.
That's right.
We do not live in a society that is geared to make us feel good about ourselves, and that none of us feel good about ourselves, and that's a bad thing. But when I thought about that notion of gladness and how many kids in this world don't get it at all, where no one is greeting them with gladness, right? That was one of my missions as First Lady. You know, it's like, that's why when you saw me out there, I spent so much time with kids. And it can break my heart by how little kids need and how little they get. And I thought, for the time I'm here, I'm gonna fill this house up with kids and gladness. They are gonna be in and out of these rooms. They're gonna come to all these important events. There are gonna be kids who never thought they set foot on the South Lawn, who are gonna get behind these gates, and they're gonna see somebody who is glad to see them. Because that's really all they want. And for us as parents, when we think we're giving them stuff, and all they really want is just our sheer joy that they are alive, the smallest thing, which is why we have to be so careful about how we deal with young people in our cities and in our towns, because there's so many people who are ready to assume the worst in kids. Presidency.
Tell us that story, because that fear almost changed history. So let's hear that story.
So Barack, in all his wonderful wisdom, had been approached to run for president. And he came to me and said, well, there are a lot of people who think I can do this, but if you say no, then the answer is no. And I was like, right, come on.
The country needs it, but
you can just say no. And my fearful mind showed up, for a period of time I had to sit with that, and my fearful mind said, girl, don't you go to the White House. Don't even try it. Somebody's gonna get hurt. It's gonna be crazy. That mind was talking to me, and I had to quiet it and say, what was it really about? Was there really harm in that? Was this something that we couldn't do? Or was it just me being afraid of new? And I had to answer that question honestly. I liked my life in Chicago. I loved being in Chicago. This is my hometown. We had a wonderful life. Our kids we had friends, we had a beautiful home. I liked my sameness. I liked my small. But I had to admit that that would be the only reason I'd say no. And I didn't want that to be the legacy of my girls. I didn't want to be the family sitting around the table with the grandkids talking about the time Grandpa could have run for president. He could have done great things in the world, but old Grandma Michelle, she's still in the kitchen. She said no. But I also had to think about all the things he and I had done, all the scary things we had accomplished, all the times we had met and surpassed our fears, the many times we were the first at tables and had gone to law school and had worked in law firms and had, started organizations. We had done hard things before. So we could do this. So that's what practice is. Because as you get older, and you start accumulating accomplishments, all the times that you've overcome your fears, you have a history of knowing what you can do. And it takes time, but if you're young, you gotta build that track record for yourself. And parents, we have to get our fears out of the way. And that, as a parent, that is a hard thing to do, is to hand your child their life and get out of the way. But if we don't let them practice their lives, we can't wait until they're 20, 25 and say, okay, now let's see what you do with it. I've been telling you what to do all this time. That is a hard thing to do, to watch them own their lives, to make mistakes, to not helicopter them, allow them to face their fears, to try on some failure early and often, and stand at the gate and watch them come and go. My parents did that for me. So I was very practiced at trying hard things.
Let's stay on the topic of children here with your beautiful baby girls up there.
Not
at all babies anymore.
This was on a trip in Venice. And we were in what we called the boatercade. We were visiting, we were on the canal, and they were selfieing it out right there. That's one of my favorite pictures.
It's so good, it's so good. So you had all those images of you in the White House with those children surrounded. I remember noting it at the time, just how many children there were in the White House. And just that time that you were there was so magical for us. Okay, for us. I'm sure it was great for you, but it was magical for us. And part of it was because it spoke to the possibility that we could make this American experiment of a multiracial democracy work.
Yeah.
Right? That we could, as diverse as we are, as much as this country has been forged in the fires of racism and oppression, that we could become one people.
Yes.
And have a leader who didn't look like all the other leaders, but who loved all of the American people.
Yes.
It was truly powerful. And there was something that you write in the book about empathy that I think is just so beautiful. And I have to read this passage because I just love it. It's about the power of human connection And for me, you know, I'm sort of obsessed, as you know,
I
with
love
this,
that about you.
with this optimism, right? With this,
I love that about you.
this thing that we can do it,
Yeah.
and that we can have cross-racial solidarity. We can make one people. And here's what you write. It's so beautiful. We are different. All I can do is try to draw closer to your uniqueness, to feel linked by the small overlaps between us. This is how empathy works. It's how differentness starts to weave itself into togetherness. Empathy fills the gaps between us, but never closes them entirely. Piece by piece, person by person, we begin to apprehend the world in more fullness. Now you can see how that fits on a person-to-person level. You know, that magic of a friendship that you didn't know you could have. And yet, we've got to add all that up to a society.
Yes.
So how is it that the tools that you offer about empathy and showing yourself are ones that we can sort of apply writ large? How do you think about how, as you've shown your family, this beautiful Black family and all of its humanity, you created more empathy for all of us?
Yeah. Well, we try to model what we want, you know, what we wanted the nation to be. But leadership is important, and we can't take it for granted.
That's right.
Because while I think there was, that under my husband's administration, I think people felt better. I do generally. People did better politically. And I don't want to be biased here because I am biased. I thought my husband was one of the best presidents I've ever had. But whose voice leads matters, and things can change quickly. You know, if you have someone at the top every day talking to the American people about what brings us together, we start looking around. These audiences are a microcosm of the way people actually want to feel.
Yeah.
You know, and we saw this for 10 years in the rallies that my husband had, and the campaign and the messaging and the way he led. But I think we took that for granted. You know, we got kind of used to that being the norm. And we kind of played around with the joke that it didn't matter who was leading, right? Because everything felt pretty stable at the time when people weren't voting and certain things happened, right? And then all of a sudden, we had a different kind of leader with a different kind of message and a different kind of emphasis, and it affected us as a nation. It affected our mood and our tone. What happened under the Obama administration was just as real as what's happening right now. We are the same country, the same people, you know. I do not doubt it for a minute, even when I see people rioting in the Capitol, you know. That empathy in me says somebody's getting in your head.
That's right.
Somebody is playing with your fear. Somebody knows what they're doing. Because it is very easy to take people's fear and turn it inside out. And to keep people distracted by all the things that can make people mad, and because the world is unfair. The names start happening, the labels start, because then it's, you're not one of us. We other each other. And then we lose empathy, because then everybody is an enemy.
That's right.
You know, and that is, you know, so what are the tools? The tools start with the thing we can control. You know, first of all, we have to see the light in ourselves, because if we don't like us and we don't like our stories, it's hard to give that empathy to somebody else. It's hard to be empathetic when you're trying to eat, you know, when you're out of a job, when you think life is unfair and there's somebody's fault, right?
Yeah.
So I think I do think the work starts from within. But then we have to show empathy to each other. You know, I mean, when I look at the riot metaphor, it's something that I found over COVID, a craft that I took up when I had to write a convention speech. I had to find some hope somewhere, but I was depressed. I was where all of us were, you know, and I just picked up these 2 needles and I taught myself this new craft. And there was something about using my hands and going small that helped quiet my worrying mind and think more broadly. And I think we don't do enough of that, especially because we've got technology and phones. We don't make anything, you know. We're disconnected from our own bodies in a sense. And for me, going small reminded me of doing the thing I can control. Yeah. You know, raising my kids. Maybe I can't educate every girl, but I gotta make sure Malia and Sasha are educated. Maybe I can't fix crime in my streets, but I'm gonna get an education, one step by step, not going too far, not going too fast, but taking care of the steps I can take. A lot of kids are trying to take on too much. They're trying to take care of families while they're in college. They're trying to pay off bills for their families while they're taking on student loans. And kids can't gobble up that much big and keep some sanity about them. So we have to help them understand the power of doing something small, the power of small steps, even something like getting up, take a shower, you know? When I'm feeling down, I set up a routine. Wake up, same time, every day, get in the shower, eat some food, move your body, small steps. You small your way into something bigger. And we do just the opposite. We think, I gotta fix it all. And when we think we gotta fix it all, you can't. So you give up real quick. Because big gets overwhelming. I say the great becomes the enemy of the good. It happens to us all the time. And I see that in young people who get burnt out thinking about the big problems that they can't even take care of the thing they actually can control. So I try to do the reverse with young people. You can't fix the climate. Do what you can to get yourself ready to fix the climate in 20 years, you know?
You know, you lost hope in that moment.
Yeah.
And I want you to tell us the story of when you had that hope restored. What was that moment?
Well, there were a series of moments. I had to write a convention speech, and there's something about the clarity for me of writing stuff down that helps sort through my mind. You know, when you're just thinking the worst is always the worst, it just spirals into most of the worst. And I had to do a convention speech where I had to bring out something hopeful. And I had to remember all the things I said. It's like, yes, we're in a COVID situation. There was George Floyd, Black Lives Matters, but there's also the goodness in America. There are also people marching. There were people of all races marching on behalf of criminal justice and racial equity. We can't forget that. We can't forget the fact that neighbors were helping neighbors. There is the flip side of that. And for me, writing helped me see that. But I also had the privilege of standing on the inaugural stage when President Biden was sworn in.
Thank Lord.
And there were the contrasts. If you recall, I was also on the stage the time before. And
your face was everyone's.
In 2016, there was no diversity on that stage, none. And that was Congress, that was the Supreme Court, those were all the supporters. And it was like, okay, this is what you meant by Make America Great Again. This was the personification. to be able to be back on that stage after January 6th, and that was a difficult time because the riots had just happened.
Days later.
It was days later. We were all not clear whether the security would be on par. You know, I told some of my staff that usually accompanied me not to come because we have Secret Service, and if something popped off, we couldn't be guaranteed that everybody would get out. We had to think about that. Is that, you know,
Yeah,
so.
She like,
I love how you're like,
popped off. Right. That part.
But that was one of those situations where something could have popped off. That's the exact proper use of that term. But that's also, you know, where you saw a different kind of energy. You know, you saw a country kind of reclaiming itself, and you had Amanda Gorman, that young brilliant poet. And I write about her in the book because I got to talk to her afterwards, and what I didn't realize, that Amanda Gorman, with all of her eloquence, that she had a speech impediment growing up, that she grew up not being able to say the letter R all her whole life. And it took her all this time to work with therapists, and she got into poetry because she was using words to help overcome her challenge, her despite, her difficulty. And through that, she found poetry. You know, and she became a poet laureate. What is just trying to get through life? You know, truly, folks aren't out to get each other. People are struggling. They just want to put food on the table. They want to have a chance to educate their kids. Kids, for the most part, are decent. They are trying to make their parents proud. That's who we are. You know, but if you have the wrong leader who tells you a different story about who we are, it is easy to slip back into our sameness, starting to be afraid of each other, stuck in our newness, our familiarity, not talking to each other, and letting other people talk about us in our ears.
That's right.
That's the work. That's what, to me, what we have to remember. I want our young people to remember that. You know, that's who America is through and through, regardless of what you see on the news, regardless of who's standing in front of a rally trying to get you worked up over some nonsense. That is what America is. And it has been that for a long time. And I think this generation will not allow us to go backwards. They've seen too much. They know what equality looks like. They know that diversity is a better way. I don't think we can put that cow back in the barn, thank goodness. She made you drop that purse.
You can see she's in love. She's all cuddled up over here.
Yeah, how long has it been? 10 years?
13
years. That's real time, so you'll be able to relate to this. 13 years right up here. 30 for us.
So we look at you.
That was on our honeymoon. I'm not on our anniversary trip. We went to Big Sur.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
So we look at this picture. We look at you and we see rare air, right? We see beautiful, strong, powerful people in their own right, each of them. We see black love. Yes. And we have seen you dance together. We've seen you smile and flirt together. And it's all great. And as I said, it is enviable. Look at that, come on.
That was in some restaurant in one of the many stops in Iowa.
Yeah.
It's like, so you talked me into this?
Yeah.
All right, we're doing this now. It's like, yeah, I know.
But I want to know, how do you fight?
How do we fight?
How do you fight? Because I think some couples need some tips.
Yes. Well, and the reason why I talk about this is because, you know, partnership is a tool.
Yeah.
You know, if you know what the partnership is all about. I think for those of us who choose to get married, and I try to define that broadly because not everybody should be married. You know, and I think there are too many young people in particular who are striving, what they want is a wedding.
Yeah.
You know, and they know nothing about what a marriage and a partnership is. Because we don't talk about it. You know, all we do is hashtag relationship goals, and you see we're fist bumping, and you know, you don't know that I probably cursed him out right before this. We're trying to figure out something, or he's tired of me, and you know, I think we have to be more honest with ourselves and our relationships, so that, you know, I see too many young people quitting on marriage too soon, which shows me you didn't really know what this was about, you know, because you weren't really ready to compromise. You didn't really even pick a partner that could align with you. I don't even know what you were thinking about. You spent more time picking the dress than you did picking the person you're saying I do to. So I want my girls to understand that marriage is a choice, and that a happy life can look like a lot of things, you know, and it's not always a fairy book journey down, you know, the aisle. That marriage is work and requires compromise, and it requires changing a lot of who you are. And that gets into the arguments, right? Because I described the difference in our personalities. I am a Capricorn. I am fire. I am quick to burn. You know, I will tell Barack 2 minutes. He's like, "What happened?" He was all cut up. He had been told off.
And
I'm
my
gone.
mom said he'd draw back a nub. He reaches in, he draw back a nub.
Well, Barack is like he talks, he's very methodical, and it's like, well, let's talk about this. I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk right now, you know? So I had to learn how to calm my little self down, and he had to learn how to be less rational. Because sometimes it's like, this, don't try to make this make sense.
Right.
My feelings don't make sense. And that's not what this is about. And you're probably still wrong, even though I can't explain why. With that, let's be rational, let's talk out the 3 points. It's like, I don't want to hear that.
Talk about John Boston
And your mama. Let me cool off, and then come back with your 5 points. But it took us practice and hanging in there with each other, right? So that's the truth of marriage. We were in Kenya. This was the first time I went to Nairobi to visit his family in Kenya there. Oh, that was a rough trip.
That's not where I thought this was.
It was a great trip, but you know, that's another thing. We traveled internationally. Let's just stop there. You learn a lot about your partner. When you travel together, let alone travel to a third world country where the electricity goes out in the middle of your shower and you're sleeping in a mud hut visiting your in-laws, right? That'll really, you know, we were on a train with chickens in our lap. And I'm like, dude, I'm from the south side of Chicago. Toilets.
Oh my
And
God.
while it was an amazing experience, it is. I'm outside of my comfort zone. More practice than new. So we learned a lot about each other on that trip. That was I think that was after the car his sister had broke down in the middle of a highway. And we were standing on the side of a dirt road waiting for a mechanic to come. That was a hard trip. But it was a new experience. So I think we have to talk about the real of marriage, because I think too many young people are looking at they're putting on a facade, right? I tell the
That's the next one. It's gonna have a glossary.
But that's an interesting thing with this generation of dating. Like, you all don't want each other to know you like each other. You know, you want to play this game and it's all this texting. It's like, okay, so what should I say? It's like, tell him you want to go out. Tell him you expect him to call you back. There's my form of advising them in their text, and then there's the, I don't want to be thirsty. So now you've wasted a year, you know, not being thirsty, and it's like all you've had was candy. You haven't built any meat or substance. You haven't practiced substance, right? And my relationship with Barack, even as I picked him to partner with, it was all thirsty. It was all substance. I picked him because he was clear about what he wanted.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't like, what do we call it? Oh, I don't want to say I'm dating. I'm good, and I'll call you back in a month. I was like, no, dude, call me back tomorrow. You know, and we're going to talk for 2 hours on the phone, and I'm going to ask you everything. And you better ask me some stuff because you better show me that you're interested. And now we're going to Kenya to meet your family. It should be happening like that.
All right, there's this really good story that I also want you to tell about Hawaii. The other time that you went to meet his family, where you were early, you was boyfriend and girlfriend, right?
Yeah, this was the first time I was meeting his family in Hawaii.
And he was like, I'm gonna take you to Hawaii. And you were like, great.
Hawaii?
Mai Tais and
that's one reason why I started dating him. In-laws in Hawaii, this is gonna be it. So it's our first trip. Well, it's our first trip, and he's going home. And I'm working as an associate in Chicago in the winter. I was so desperate, number one, to see him, but to see him in Hawaii. And of course, I had my whole image of what was going to happen. We were going to take long beach walks and have Mai Tais. I had never been to Hawaii, so I'm thinking lays and the ocean breezes. And, you know, so I got my mind all made up. So we land and, you know, we go through the city. I don't readily see the beach right away. We go to his grandparents' house, which is a cinder block tin-rise apartment that looks like every other apartment in Chicago. I'm like, okay, this is where Toot and Gramps live. And so we go in, and Toot is lovely, and they're Midwesterners, so there was so much familiarity there. They were like my grandparents. That was another thing about race. It's like, it doesn't have anything to do with race. They were from Kansas. That's like being from Chicago. Same tuna fish. They made their tuna fish the same. They had the same saltine crackers. We ate on TV trays, you know. They had 60 Minutes on. We did jigsaw puzzles. It was just like being a dandy and my grandparents, right? And I was like, this is really cool. But this was him coming home. This wasn't a vacation for him. He was visiting his family. So first day, that's what we did. We visited. I'm like, okay, that's great. Second day, back at Toot and Gramps, you know, more jigsaw puzzles, more dinner on the TV tray. I'm like looking out at the sun. It's like, well, which direction is the beach? Third day, you know. So it was, when I was being young, I started getting a little bit of an attitude. It's like, well, this is supposed to be a vacation, and what about this, and what about that? And I was starting to be disappointed, right? Because I was young and silly, right? And I didn't know what Barack was showing me. I thought he wasn't giving me enough attention. What he was showing me was how he shows up for his family. You know, he was showing me that he was an integral part of his family, that he was there for his little sister to help her apply to college. He was making sure that his mother's finances were in order. He was the backbone. That was important to him. You know, and it wasn't like we didn't go to the beach, because he'd be so mad if he thought I told him this story, like he never took me to the beach or we didn't have any fun on that trip. But that's the point I was making, was that he was showing me what the real of what a relationship with him would be like. That he shows up for his family. You know, it may not be glamorous, it may not be rich, it may not look like it does in the books, and to this day, Barack has always shown up. I don't care if he was in the state senate or across the world. Barack shows up for me and the girls. He did it in the White House, coming home for dinner every night. He showed up for me. And sometimes in our image of what love should be, we think it's Mai Tais on the beach when it's actually tuna on the TV table. And that's what real love is. When the kids were little, I was like, dude, it's your fault. Because they're too cute. Look at those two cute ones there. But I'm exhausted. There's no 50-50 going on there. And I can't be mad at those two. They're too cute.
That's right.
So Barack was the problem for 10 years. But see, if you don't hang in there, my kids are gone now.
Yeah.
They gone. And now I look over at my husband, I'm like, oh, there you are. I remember you. But you gotta be able to ride some years of tough. And let me tell you, if I had given up on my marriage in the times that it was tough, I would have missed out. That's like another ride you take. You know, it's like we've had 30 great years. Maybe we have 7, 8 hard ones. I would take that, those odds anytime. But too many young people, they quit when it's hard, not realizing that marriages are long and they grow and they build, you evolve over time, but you have to practice that maturity and that stability to get to the other side.
You hear that, honey? No.
That's right, because your husband is in the audience.
Yeah,
You can't say that. She loves you. He didn't tell me anything backstage. I'm just messing with you.
All right, so you were in the White House. I feel like all Black women in America were holding our breath.
Oh my gosh.
With you, for you, trying to protect you from the double standards, the expectations. I mean, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
And maybe more to Black women, anyone who had ever been in that position of being the other and the only. And you write in the book about wearing armor. And we know about wearing armor.
Yeah.
And yet you talk about how important it is to let it slip sometimes. And you say it's about learning how to shelter your flame without hiding its light, which is just so beautiful. So what advice do you have for probably everyone in this room who in some arena in their life needs to wear armor? How do you strike that balance?
You know, we have to get out of other people's mirrors, you know, because what I find is that if we don't show up as our authentic selves, because we've already said it's not accepted, right? It's like we're wearing a mask. And when you're wearing a mask, you're using one hand to hold it up. And it makes it hard to do a lot of things because you're not completely showing up as yourself. So the work starts with us accepting our full selves, our full stories. I tell this story about a young woman, one of my top aides. She's not with me now, she just took another job, but her name is China. She was my right-hand person, my primary assistant through the second term and outside. This young woman did everything with me. She had my credit cards, my phone number. She had all the, I couldn't do anything without China. That's how close we were. Brilliant young woman, right? Newer mom, she was raised by a single mother. We were close. After the first year we were out, she said, ma'am, because they all call me ma'am, especially she's Southern, so it's ma'am. I'm like, okay, China. I need to talk to you. And I'm thinking, okay, she gonna quit, right? Because why? I see her all the time. She's with me in the house all the time. Why do we gotta have to talk? I'm like, okay, China, let's talk. She pulls me aside to tell me, I need to tell you something about my father. And I said, okay. And she said, my father was in prison. And I said, oh, okay. I said, did this just happen? Because I didn't hear about it. She's like, no, he was in prison when I was younger. And I said, okay. It wasn't news to me. It was something that she never fully shared, but it wasn't something that was a surprise to me. But what she was doing, she had been holding on to this because she thought it mattered. She thought that working with Michelle and Barack Obama, that we somehow cared about what her father's past was. She had been carrying around what she thought was this secret all these years. And you could understand why she might want to hide that part of herself, but the fact that she felt like she needed to hide it with me when she didn't, that's what I'm saying, when a lot of times we're holding on to things that other people don't even know is a thing, you know? So when I told her, girl, I respect you even more now. I was like, that's not a thing to be ashamed of. You have gotten through college, your mother raised you, you were right-hand person to Michelle Obama, and your father went to prison. That's a thing you talk about. That is a superpower. That means you, in spite of all that you've been through, you showed up at the White House. I was like, you share that part of your story. You don't hide that part of yourself. So she went on, she felt relieved, as if, what, you thought I was gonna fire you because of that? But what happened after that is that because I gave her the okay to open up, to unburden in that way, she wound up writing an article about it. It got published in Essence. She went on a speaking tour, because what happened is that when she shared that part of her story, she found that there were so many other people, all races, who were like, my gosh, that was my thing, or I was hiding this part about myself, my story. Sometimes we feel invisible because we're standing in the darkness. And so what we have to do is start being confident in all of our whole story.
At the beginning, I really do mean it. You could have spent those 8 years in service that we now know you could have just ended with a word before it even began, but you didn't, and I think that wasn't for you, that was for us, so thank you. But you left and you didn't stop, and you continue to give us your voice, and in fact, the voice we've been waiting to hear. And I just am so grateful for that. So this night is not really ending because we have the light we carry.
We do.
And we can share it with our friends, and we can talk to our friends about it, and we can start the conversation and continue the conversation.
And that's what this is about. I mean, I am offering my tools, but we all have them. And for the young people, you're developing them. You know, if you feel like, I don't have anything to work with, I just want young people, be patient with yourselves. You know, do not judge your life now. You know, you're going to accumulate this knowledge over time, and it just hurts my heart when young people at a certain age feel depressed and feel hopeless and feel bogged down, right? Because there's so much left, you know, if you just understand that wisdom does come with age. And a lot of this stuff I have come to after 58 years of messing up and looking back and going, ooh, that didn't work, let me try this on. That's what life is. So because I know there are a lot of my young people in this audience, and I know that there are a lot of young people struggling with mental health and anxiety, you know, and I want us as the adults around them to take that seriously, to make sure that we're urging our young people to get help when they need it, you know, to get professional help. But I want our young people to be patient with yourselves. You know, I could not know the things I know at your age. This is not miracle work, it's just time. And I want you all to understand that and be kind to yourselves as you get through what will be this age, teenager, college age. These are the hardest years. Because all y'all have is youth. And you'll learn that ain't that much fun. You know? So grow out of it. And don't take off, don't try to take on too much. You know, just focus on what you can control. Start there. That's what I want for you all.
Let us thank our forever First Lady, Michelle.
Yeah. My girl. Thank you, Chicago. I miss you. I'll be back.
Was it worth being out at almost 11 p.m.?
I love it.
That was so good. Thank you. Who do you have to thank for sending you?
Thank you, Daddy.
Chicago. Oh, I'm not walking over that.